will be informed verbally by their manager and or their SMDI that they have breached the culture of Institute, failed to meet the objectives of their role, or to adhere to employment policies and or had a behavioral offense. It's a bit of a mouthful, but I really want to emphasize that this is actually the same thing that we have seen our effective Institute staff members do all along, which is be very open and very transparent with their staff when something has happened that they believe to be a breach in the expectations that we have for our Institute culture and for how we do our work together. I want to say one other thing about the fair warning policy here, which is that this policy can and should happen at any point in an Institute staff member's experience. It can happen in the spring as people are going through training and getting ready to join us this summer in Phoenix or in Chicago. It can also happen on the ground at Institute, whether it's week 1 or week 2 or even week 4 or week 5. As we see something happen, it is our responsibility to acknowledge that and to be open about it with our staff in terms of their performance and their development. Okay? So this is just the basic definition. What we're going to do now is talk about process related to this policy, and then in a moment, we'll actually talk about some of the specific behaviors or breaches and expectations that we think would lead to us actually initiating this policy with one of our staff members. So, first, implications. And again, we'll just sort of say as a blanket statement, I don't want you to worry right now about, oh my gosh, what does this mean I have to do with my staff members this summer? We are sharing this information with you right now so you're aware of the policy and how it would be implemented should you need to. But we realize this is something that most likely the vast majority of you in this room will not have to directly work with. And as such, you'll work with your manager if and when the need presents itself. So right now, we're really giving you the overview of what this policy is and how it works. Please don't worry about the details unless it becomes an issue for you at this spring or this summer, okay? So let's talk generally about what it would mean for you as a manager. First, you should know that your manager would discuss with you a breach in expectations almost immediately after that breach took place. And as such, we expect you to do the same with someone that you manage. Patrick made the point in his session earlier today that sometimes doing so immediately may not actually be the best course of action. If you feel like you need 10 minutes, or if you feel like actually you need a couple of hours so that you can talk to your manager and figure out what the best way would be to respond to the situation, we want you to do that. We want you to really feel confident and that you have all of the information you need going into a performance conversation with your staff member. That being said, you absolutely should have this conversation with them within 24 hours of whatever this breach is. So, at that point, you would talk with your staff member. And again, just really to stress this, this should be a conversation. This should not be you saying, I saw this, I heard this, as a result we're doing this. You really want to make sure that you have all of the information that you need about this situation and that you get your staff member's perspective. So it's very much a dialogue between you and between the person that you manage. Coming out of this conversation, you would then do some formal documentation that this conversation has taken place and that the fair warning has been issued to the staff member. Again, don't worry right now about what that documentation is, how detailed does it need to be, does it need to be on letterhead? If your mind is going to that place, just put those concerns at ease for right now and know again that your manager will work with you to implement this policy if and when you need to do so. One other important note, because we have a lot of Institute staff members that are currently on full-time Teach for America staff or in the process of joining. I think more than I've ever seen before in the years that I've worked on the teacher preparation team. It is important to note that staff members that are in that process, either currently on full-time staff or in the process of joining full-time staff, will have their managers notified if a fair warning has been issued that could ultimately lead to their dismissal. Here's my little note here, okay? Decisions made during Institute related to the fair warning policy and how that impacts full-time employment at Teach for America will be done exclusively on a case-by-case basis. There are no rules here for what could lead to dismissal from a full-time job. It will be something that we look at in terms of leaders at Institute, in terms of our human assets team, potentially our legal affairs team, and the manager of that person. So truly just know that we take this very seriously. Any decisions related to full-time staff will be made on a case-by-case basis. Any questions just about implications and process at this point? Well, maybe one question that some of you have. Why do we have a fair warning policy instead of a formal staff improvement plan? I'm sure the vast majority of you know at least some level of detail about our core member improvement plan, and Tiffany is going to be sharing with us a whole lot more detail about it this afternoon. In a nutshell, the reason why we do not have a formal staff improvement plan is because we, quite frankly, do not have the capacity nor the time to effectively train our part-time summer managers to execute that process. And I personally also believe that we don't want to take attention away from what our priority is this summer, which is student achievement, and as a means to that end, core member development. So that really, in a nutshell, is why we have come up with this policy as opposed to something more formal and a more sort of distinct process. Okay, so let's recap some key points related to the fair warning policy here. It's a policy, it's not a tool, it's not something that you're going to be filling out, it's something that you will do on a case-by-case basis with your staff should it become necessary. What we're trying to do here is really communicate to a staff member that a breach in our expectations has occurred and that we expect their performance to improve. If it does not, it may ultimately lead to their dismissal from Institute staff. And again, just to reiterate, this can happen in the spring and it can also happen at the summer at Institute itself. One of the most important first steps is going to be you actually sharing any concerns you have with your manager, so that your manager can really work with you to determine whether or not a fair warning is justified in this situation, and if so, then again the details about how you should go about really implementing the fair warning policy. Lastly, you should just really see those of us on the IMT as your partners in doing this. This is not something that you would ever do in isolation on your own. All right, so let's move next into the types of behaviors or instances that we think would actually warrant implementing the fair warning policy. You can see we've broken these into two categories, related to performance and then related to professionalism. So performance here first is really us just saying, this is where we would see a staff member not meeting the objectives of their role. You know, and if it helps you to think about it in this way, how are they performing against the vision of excellence for what we expect of them as an instructional staff member, for example. On the professional